As we were talking, we were, of course, talking about things that pastors talk about, which to each other we talk about what's going on in the church, what challenges we have, what things we're seeing, and what things we would like to see improved, and things that bouncing ideas off of each other. What can we do to inspire God's people and to things. And one of the things that he had asked me earlier, what I was preaching on this morning, and I said, I've studied a lot of things this week, studied some things this week, and I said, I don't know yet. And then we got to talking, and I said, one thing that we have in the church, you have consumers and producers. And boom. Who understands who a consumer is?
Right.
Who understands that? Who knows what a consumer is? Most of us are consumers at one time or another.
Yes.
We go get something, we consume it, we get it for our needs, we take it, and we do something with it. A producer is one who makes the product, who provides the product, who offers the service. And so you have consumers and you have producers. Now, one thing that you have that you hear, how many of you in here know what GDP or GNP stands for? When you're talking financial terms. Okay. Well, all of you should know after I read this. GDP is gross domestic product. That's how the nation measures producers versus consumers.
Right.
Also, they came up with another one because they didn't really like how GDP was going, so they made up gross national product, which is GNP, which is measured just a little bit different. But GDP is the total market value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a given year, equal to total consumer investment and government spending plus the value of exports minus the value of imports. You said, what's that got to do with church? It's got a lot to do with church. What you're putting in versus what you're taking out.
Right.
Now, gross national product, if you want to differentiate it from gross domestic product, GDP includes only goods and services produced within the geographic boundaries of the U.S., regardless of the producer's nationality. GNP doesn't include goods and services produced by foreign producers. They don't include Honda in that. But does include goods and services produced by U.S. firms operating in foreign countries. So they put P&G back in. Well, not too many of you listen to too many financial reports, huh? Well, I do know a little bit about it. Not enough to make me any money, but I know enough to lose money. But what's that got to do with church? Well, in Proverbs chapter 24, let's turn there. Starting at verse 30, and then I'm going to read some other places in Proverbs. And then I want to take us over to Mark. And it brings it around to the spiritual aspect of it. What Jesus expects. What Jesus told us we needed to do. And it says in verse 30, it says, I went by the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. And lo, it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof. And the stone wall thereof was broken down. Then I saw and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. Proverbs chapter 10 gives us a comparison of the slothful and the diligent. There's many throughout Proverbs, and there's many throughout the Bible, but I'm just going to pick a select few here. Starting at verse 3, it says, The Lord will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famish, but he casteth away the substance of the wicked. He becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich. He that gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame. Blessings are upon the head of the just, but violence covereth the mouth of the wicked. And then over in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 24 and then verse 27, it says, The hand of the diligent shall bear rule, but the slothful shall be under tribute. Verse 27, The slothful man roasteth not that which he took in hunting, but the substance of a diligent man is precious. I want to ask you today, when it comes to church, when it comes to God's house, are we consumers or producers? Are we just coming to church to consume what's here just to get our blessing and go to the house? Or are we willing to step up and produce for the Lord? Are we willing to not only be a consumer? God wants us to be consumers and producers. Sure. Not just a consumer and not just a producer. Because a producer, if all he's doing is trying to produce, he eventually will grow weak because he has not consumed anything. That's like if you're working and you work all day and work and work and work and work, and by the evening you've not taken in any food or water, you're going to not be any good for anything because you're going to make yourself weak because you have not consumed anything within you. You've done good work, and thank God for the work, but whatever you've accomplished isn't really helping you any because you've neglected yourself. But then you've got those who are consumers who just come in, they eat up everything that's there, and they're mad when they don't have more because they didn't take time to produce anything. They just took from those who had and consumed. See, one of the things that we look at in the church is we look at people and we say, well, are they producing? Well, and I've noticed this. You'll hear people talking in after a service and they'll say, well, so-and-so didn't get happy today. So-and-so, normally, maybe they get up and sing, or maybe they testify, or maybe they would shout, and you would say, well, they didn't do anything today. But then you have to look back and say, what did I do? Did I produce anything today? Right. Sometimes, see, within a church, it shouldn't just be on the one person. Everybody shouldn't just be expecting Frida to start up the train and start shouting. Right. But when God moves on you, you need to be willing to be a producer. because sometimes we're waiting on certain people to do certain things, and then if they don't do anything, then we go, hey, what happened today? It's because we've become so consumer-minded and consuming the blessings of God instead of being willing to be a producer and allowing God to work to us that we might bless others. Amen. See, one thing about it is, some will say, well, I can sing, but I keep it to myself. Well, you're willing to consume what John sung, but you're not willing to produce anything that you could sing that somebody else could consume. Yes. It probably ain't going to be too much shouting today. Not going to be too much producing of shouting today. But we got to understand that we have consumers and we have producers. We have those that are willing to allow everybody else to work and those that are willing to work. But the thing is, we've got to make this to where it's more equal in the way that God intended it to be. In business, you hear that 80% of the workforce only does 20% of the work. And about 20% of the workforce does 80% of the work. I've been in business. I know. I've been in management. That's true. I mean, sometimes places have to hire extra people just so they can get the 20% of the work done. They already got the 20% who can handle the 80%. But they're having to hire extra people to take up and get the other 20% done. Now, those of you that have worked for a while, you know what that is. Because most of you were probably, and if you're a Christian, I hope that you were in the 20% that was willing to produce the 80%. Hey, because you know what? We're not working for our employer. We're working for God. Amen. In everything you do, you're working as unto the Lord. Whatever it is, you're working as unto the Lord. And I know some of you have had some bad bosses. Some of you have had some real low-down, dirty jobs. But the thing is, when you are faithful to what God tells you to do, you know you can hold your head high and say, hey, I've done exactly what the Lord wanted me to do. Now, as we look at consumer and producer, Jesus, he gave a parable on this. It's mentioned in Matthew, and it's also mentioned in Mark. Mark chapter 4. And the church is not exempt from needing to produce. If you're a Christian, Jesus expects you to produce. He expects you to produce. He even put it in this parable for us to understand we're not just to be consumers. See, one of the problems that even Jesus had with his followers, there were a lot of consumers. Hey, there were 5,000 plus women and children. And then there was another time there was 4,000 plus women and children. And they were willing to consume all the fish and the bread that he could give them. But brother, when it come down and he told them about the taking of him, taking of his flesh, and taking of his blood, it says many walked away and walked no more with him. Why? Because they were just consumers. They weren't producers. See, you need, as a church, we've got to be producers and consumers. We've got to be both. Because who are we consuming from? We're consuming what God gives us as his children. What does God give his children? Sister Pauline gives us good things, don't he? Yeah. Boy, he gave you something good, didn't he? It's a blessing to see that. Right. God did. But see, there's also got to be a producing. See, if we just show up every Sunday, well, preacher, bless me if you can. Yeah. Amen. Yes. What good is that going to do? You're going to consume everything that is given. But if you go out there and you never use it, are you going to produce anything from it? Hey, I can be the most eloquent, and I can give you 3 points and a poem and send you out of here, and you're going home. Woo, that was good, preacher. Amen, preacher. And then you get out there and it's like, come back next week. Well, Brother Bill, did you go out and do anything with what I preached this week?
Amen.
What did you do with what, those of you that were here Tuesday night, what have you already done with what I preached to you?
Yes.
What have you done with what I preached on last Sunday?
Thank you, Father.
What are you going to do with what I preach on this morning? Are you just going to consume it? Or are you going to consume it and produce something from it? See, there was all those that were willing to hang out with Jesus as long as they could get the fish and the bread.
Right.
Do we serve God just for the fish and the bread? Now, I told you the 80-20 rule for business, but you know in church, and Brother Bill, he will probably amen this one. In church, it's more like 90-10 or 95-5.
Right. Amen.
Church, we need to be more 100-100.
Yes. Thank you, Father.
100% of us pulling and doing 100% of the work. Because the thing is, you can accomplish more. I tell you what, whenever you can get a group that is willing to work together, you can get a lot accomplished.
Amen.
You know, one of the things they done when they did the atomic bomb, it wasn't that they put it on one person, but they had a whole great big group. And the thing is, not everybody in the group knew exactly what the other person was doing all the time, but they knew they were working toward a common goal, and they accomplished that goal. See, church, you ain't always going to know what Bill here is going to be doing, and Brother Mike's going to be doing, and why God has put it out there for them. But the thing is, you put your part in. As my dad used to say, don't worry that the horse is blind. Load the wagon anyway. The guy that's got the horse, he'll take care of the horse. Of course, if you go to New York City, they're trying to retire all the horses. Man, what an economy, putting the horses out of work.
Yes.
But here's what Jesus had to say. He said, hearken, in chapter 4, verse 3 of Mark. He says, hearken, behold, there went out a sower to sow, and it came to pass, as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and the fowls of the air came and devoured it up. And some fell on stony ground where it had not much earth, and immediately it sprang up. Now, there's probably, I could probably get 100 sermons out of this whole story, but I'm only taking it one direction today, okay? We ain't got time for the other. But it says, where it had not much earth, and immediately it sprang up because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away, and some fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no fruit. See, that's not what the church is supposed to be. Listen. And says, and other fell on good ground, and did yield fruit that sprang up and increased, and brought forth some 30, and some 60, and some 100. Now, that one part I like in the way Matthew put it, he put it the other way. He said 100, 60, and then 30. He started off. But it says, and he said unto them, he that hath ears to hear, let him hear. And they were confused about this parable. And Jesus explained it to them. In verse 14, he says, the sower soweth the word, and these are they by the wayside, where the word is sown, But when they have heard, Satan cometh immediately and taketh away the word that was sown in their hearts. And these are they likewise which are sown on stony ground, who, when they have heard the word, immediately receive it with gladness, and have no root in themselves, and so endure but for a time afterward. Then affliction and persecution ariseth for the word's sake. Immediately they are offended. And these are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word, and the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things entereth in, choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. Now, as you're trying to produce, you're going to run into this. As you're trying to produce as a Christian, you're going to run into that top part there. But here's what Jesus says. And these are they which are sown on good ground, such as hear the word and receive it, and bring forth fruit. As a Christian, you're commanded to bring forth fruit. Here's what Jesus said. He said some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100. Now, if you notice there, Jesus does not differentiate really between those that bring forth 30 and those that bring forth 100. Right. He just says bring forth fruit. But where he does differentiate, he does not say that some bring forth 0.
Right. Yes. Right.
Now, church, as Christians, we are not called to bring forth 0.
Sure. Blessing, Lord.
We're called to bring forth fruit. And the reason Jesus said 30, 60, and 100 is that once you get one, it can multiply from there. God does not deal in addition, but God deals in multiplication. When he told Adam and Eve, he said, be fruitful and multiply. He didn't tell them, be fruitful and add.
Yes, amen.
He said, be fruitful and multiply. Whenever you plant seeds, you don't expect when you plant one corn seed to get one kernel of corn. What is the worth the effort? I mean, if you planted one piece of corn and all it was going to grow up after you watered it, tended it, took care of it, and all it was going to be on that corn was one more kernel of corn, what's the effort? Well, I mean, that's wasted effort. What happens with that? Hey, I planted some corn this year. It didn't do real well, but you know what I found on every one of those? There was at least 200 kernels of corn on every ear of corn I had. I counted them as I ate them. Now, they didn't make big ears, but yet they were corn. And it was able to be eaten. It was probably in the 30-fold range. Yes. Now, I like corn that's 100-fold. Y'all do too. Amen. Amen. Or maybe y'all a bean crowd. Maybe I'm preaching corn to the bean crowd. But the thing is, you don't plant just one thing to expect to get just one thing back. You expect to have multiple. And see, that's what God expects. Hey, he's planted the word in your heart. He said, go, produce more, bring forth more. The thing is, you've got to be willing to allow God for you to produce. See, all those, they were willing to consume. But they weren't willing to go out and produce. My mother-in-law always said, a free horse is easy road. Now, I never had to ride horses, but pretty much what she was saying, if you don't have to work for your horse, hey, you can pretty easy to ride. Somebody gives you a horse, you don't have to take care of it. Somebody else takes care of it. Somebody else feeds it. Somebody else takes everything and does with it, and all you do is go ride on it. It's pretty easy to ride that horse. But when you have to do all the work for the horse, and take care of the horse, and make sure it's okay, then that's another story. I guess in our day, it would be more